In this video, we are looking at imaginary numbers. So, they're called complex numbers because they have two components. We have the real side and we have the imaginary part. So A is the real number, which means it's not a negative number, the square root of a negative number, but the right hand side is the imaginary part. And imaginary numbers are even roots of negative numbers. So we can write it as Z is equal to A plus BI, which is the complex number. And the complex number is all of what A plus BI is. Or we can write it in this way: Z is equal to X plus YI. Calculate root of minus 9, so square root of minus 9. So we can separate it like this: square root of minus 1 times square root of 9 will be equal to the square root of minus 9. Consider this: square root 9. So square root 9 is equal to 1 times 9 with the square root sign over it. We can break that up into square root of 1 plus square root of 9. You need to understand the exponent laws, the third rules. Square root of AB is equal to root A times root of B. Let's get back to the question. So we have square root of minus 9 times square root of 9. But you need to remember what we learned in grade 10. I is equal to the square root of a negative 1. This means I squared will be equal to minus 1. You need to remember those two things on the extreme left hand side in the box when working with complex numbers. So notice we have square root of minus 1 in our question. Notice that I is equal to square root of minus 1. So we can substitute I for square root of minus 1. Square root of 9 is equal to 3. 3 times I is equal to 3I. Remember this, that root AB, that is the square root of AB, is equal to the square root of A times the square root of B. Square root of 18, for example, can you break it down into the square root of two numbers? Square root of 2 times square root of 9. So square root of 2 is in a third form. It will remain square root of 2. Square root of 9 will be equal to 3. So we have square root of 2 times 3. Put them together, we will have 3 square root 2. Consider the next question. X squared plus 1 is equal to 0. I would like you to pause the video and solve for x. See if you are able to do it. First step is to move plus 1 over to the other side. This will give us x squared is equal to minus 1. How will we solve this? Now normally in normal maths they will say this is not solvable. It's like no real solution. Because why? It's a non-real number. So square rooting both sides, we will always have plus and minus as an answer. Remember, for quadratic there are two answers: a plus answer, positive answer, a minus answer, a negative answer, besides the minus 1 on the right hand side in orange. So square root both sides and place your root sign. So x is equal to plus minus the square root of minus 1. So in pure maths, they wouldn't continue into this part. With technical maths, this is what our topic is about: complex numbers. So remember now what I said, the two things in the box. Check on the left hand side. I is equal to root minus 1. Okay? So I is equal to square root of minus 1. So here we have square root of minus 1. What should we do? Substitute it. X is equal to I. Notice that that is a plus or minus I, not just I. So many people would just write I, but please note here you should write plus minus I. Complex numbers, odd roots of negative numbers, are real. Do you agree? So the odd roots of negative numbers are real. Example, this cube root of negative 8. So if we were to break that up, minus 2 to the power 3 is equal to minus 8. Hope you agree. You can try this on your calculator. So because it was 8, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. But because it's a negative, inside the negative, place the power 3. So we have minus 2 to the power 3, meaning minus 2 times minus 2 times minus 2 will give me minus 8. So this cube root is going to cancel that cubing. Okay, you with me? So the 3 will cancel that 3 because this 3 becomes divide by 3. So when we see the cube root, it means divide the exponent by 3. So this is going to give me minus 2 to the power 1. So our answer will be minus 2. So the cube root of negative 8 is equal to minus 2. Please notice that this is real. Complex numbers. Even roots of negative numbers are imaginary. So the even roots. Notice in the previous one, it was the cube root, which is a negative root. So this was an odd root, in other words, an odd root of a negative number. Notice that the exponent was 3 because it was odd roots or odd numbers. Okay, you get the idea? The next one is looking at even numbers. So even roots of negative numbers are imaginary. Example, the square root of minus 16. The square root of minus 16, it cannot be solved. The calculator will say no real solution on your calculator or math error. So don't forget, we always break it into the square root of minus 1. So when you see a negative under the root sign, first thing you need to do is write square root of minus 1. This is your first and most important step. Then all you do, you copy the number that you see. So if it was 16, square root of 16. If it was 8, square root of 8. Do you get the point? So this is your first step. It would be nice to use another color for the root minus 1. So root minus 1, we can substitute I there. And the square root of 16 is 4. So we will get 4i. I want you to pause the video and complete the next sets of questions. Pause the video, try these out using this method above on the screen. Right, the first step is to put in the root minus 1 multiplied by the number under the root sign, which is 1. We're going to get 1i. 1 times anything is equal to I. In the next one, the same method, root minus 1 times the number under the root sign. Now don't forget that the square root of 4 is 2 and the root minus 1 is always I. Root minus 1 times the number under the root sign. Don't forget that root minus 1 is always I. Square root of 25 is 5. Going to the next one, root minus 1 times it by the number under the root sign. Root of 36 is 6 and I for the root minus 1. This is fairly simple. If you manage to get all those 4 right, correct, at this moment, you more or less know something. You are on a good path. If you are battling with this, I would suggest continuing before moving any further. Go and continue and do them again. Practice it before moving further. Now, what we learned here, we are going to go in the reverse direction. So now we have 2i. We want to go and put it back into a third form with a negative under the root sign. So the first step will be to write it out. 2 times root minus 1. Okay? Then we will need to square both of them. But because we squared them, we'll now have to square root them. Why are we doing this? Because we do not want to change the value of the question. So this is why we have to insert the root sign. Okay? Does it make sense? So 2 squared is 4, meaning 2 times 2 is 4. And here we have the square root, and we are squaring. These are opposites. Therefore, it will cancel each other, and you'll just be left with minus 1. So then we will have 4 times minus 1 is minus 4 with the root sign. Notice we now went in the reverse direction of what we just learned prior. Now, pause the video, see if you can do the next two, 5i and 6i. Right, so 5 times root minus 1. Don't forget to square both of them and square root. So we know that 5 squared means 5 times 5 is 25. The roots will cancel. The 2 will get minus 1. Square root sign over both those. We now get 25 times minus 1 is minus 25 with the root sign on top. 6i, the exact same process. Square the 6, square the root minus 1, square root sign on top. 6 squared is 36, and the root will cancel the square, the root will cancel the square, and 36 times minus 1 will give me minus 36 with the square root sign on top. This is complex numbers. Do practice more of these before moving to the next lesson.